Hey everyone, for the past couple months, I've been both watching and reading the Harry Potter series. So I figured what better time than now while it's fresh in my brain to rank the movies. So get out your wands and let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about criteria, starting with source material. Obviously, without the books, we wouldn't have the movies. So I think it's important how closely they adapted to the book. Obviously, they're big books, so you can't do, a word for word type thing, but I still think it's important how close they got to the vibe and the feeling of the book and what it was trying to represent. Also, performances are important. I think the performances in all of these movies are really very good, but some movies have better performances than others. And emotional impact. I think at the core of Harry Potter, there's a really strong emotional tie for the fans. And so I think the emotional impact of the movies is important in how that affects the story. And finally, is the movie distinctive? Does it distinguish itself from the other movies? So that's our criteria. So let's get right into the list now. So at number 8, unfortunately in last place, I got to go with the Chamber of Secrets. It just doesn't feel that distinctive. It feels really close to the vibe of the first one. It doesn't really separate itself that much. The Dobby stuff is really funny and really interesting, but that's both at the beginning and at the end of the movie, so it's not that big of a part of the movie. Also, Lockhart, as much as I love Kenneth Branagh's performance, just isn't that interesting of a character. It's just not that interesting overall of A Year at Hogwarts. It's a book that I put towards the end as well, and so for that reason, Chamber of Secrets is in 8th. At number 7, I'm going to go with Deathly Hallows Part 1. I think this is a really interesting and difficult task for David Yates. I actually think it lends itself the best to his directing, but a movie that's only half of a story, that doesn't take place in really any of the normal places that we know from the Harry Potter story that we've seen to this point, is a really difficult challenge. And I think in a lot of ways, David Yates does a really good job with this movie. It really gives Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, and Daniel Radcliffe all a chance to really thrive as actors. And so I think overall, it's a really solid movie. The addition of the Harry and Hermione dance to Nick Cave is an absolutely brilliant idea. Most of the time when they add stuff, I don't really agree, but I thought this one was really good. But overall, this movie kind of just suffers under the weight of being an unfinished version of a story. And I think you can really feel that, especially when they kind of just cut it off at Voldemort, putting the wand in the sky. So at number 6, I'm going to go with The Half-Blood Prince. I do think this has really good performances. Particularly, they really let Tom Felton cook up in the astronomy tower when he's about to attempt to assassinate Dumbledore. However, I do think this movie suffers under some really weird choices to leave some things in from the book and take some things out. Particularly focusing on the Ron romantic angle just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you have a better romantic angle with Harry and Ginny that I think is just more interesting in the books. And overall, you cut a ton of Voldemort backstory, which is the best part of the Half-Blood Prince book and would have been awesome to see on the big screen. So I always hold that against this movie. However, from the moment when Harry and Dumbledore enter the cave to the end of the movie, this movie is phenomenal, and it probably has the best music aside from the first one. And so it does have a lot of things going from it, but you almost can't forgive the stuff that they leave out and the potential that it could have had. At number 5, I'm going to go with The Goblet of Fire. I think this is one of the more interesting entries and one of the more fun entries because it takes a location that we know in Hogwarts, but it puts a fun spin on it. We're not doing Quidditch or anything like that. So we get to see, the different trials and things like that. And so that means we get to see Harry flying away from the dragon all around the castle. We get to see the Yule Ball, which is just a funny thing to see, which, by the way, this movie captures Ron's angst from the book perfectly. And so I think it gets a lot of points for that, as well as seeing different things like the lake and the maze that I think add a lot to this story, as well as getting to see things that sort of flesh out the world, which is, the different wizarding schools, as well as the Triwizard Tournament, and getting some more of that ministry involvement. However, this movie does make a weird choice in not really giving you much Barty Crouch before, so you don't really feel like you have a relationship to the big reveal at the end. However, Voldemort in the cemetery is absolutely awesome stuff, and Harry crying over Cedric is one of the most emotionally impactful images of the movies. At number 4, I'm going to go with The Order of the Phoenix. I think this is really interesting because I really, really like all of these books. And I really like The Order of the Phoenix, but it can be a bit of a slog to read. There's just a lot of Harry Potter angst. And I think this story in the movie kind of takes that angst and kind of makes it a little bit smaller, which I think is to the benefit of the story. I think Umbridge is tremendous. The performance is great. You really hate her, and you really hate her like you should. And I think that's a great translation from the books because she is horrid and she is the worst. And I think, the performance absolutely kills that, absolutely gives you that feeling. And so I think that's really important. But most importantly, this movie has the two best action set pieces in the entire franchise, whether that is the Order of the Phoenix fighting the Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries or Voldemort fighting Dumbledore in the Hall of the Ministry. I think all of these sequences are some of the best that this series has, and you get to see some of Daniel Radcliffe's best acting when Sirius dies and they cut the sound. And so I think for those reasons, I'm going to put the Order of the Phoenix at number 4. At number 3, I'm going to go with the Philosopher's/Sorcerer's Stone. I love this movie. I think it is a lot of the nostalgia of the Harry Potter movies, and I think one of the best parts is that it seems to be the most book accurate to me. Obviously, it's one of the longer movies and it's one of the shorter books, so it has that going for it. But I think it just really captures the magical feeling of Harry's first time at Hogwarts, kind of as you're experiencing all of these things for the first time, so is Harry. And so I think that plays really well into what this movie is trying to get at and the feeling that it's trying to get at. Also, John Williams' score is absolutely magical. And so that's why I'm going to go with the Sorcerer's and Philosopher's Stone at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with The Deathly Hallows Part 2. This movie gets the benefit of wrapping up a lot of emotional storylines, which I think, lends itself to just being a really interesting movie to watch. It also has the battle on Hogwarts. It has Harry getting to see Dumbledore and sort of that afterlife type thing. It has Snape's memories, which I think is all stuff that are really big highlights from the book. And so I think that's a lot of the best of the Deathly Hallows book that all gets to be in one movie where you don't have to do a lot of the build-up stuff. And so overall, I think this movie is really, really good. It does a really, really good job of concluding the series. Really, the only knock that I have for it is the way that they kill Voldemort doesn't really make any sense. I think in the book, it makes sense that he dies as a human. There's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of metaphor in that. But when you make him die in a sort of magical way, it takes away a lot of that symbolism of Voldemort's fear of death and trying to be something bigger than a human. And so that's really my only knock against this. But I mean, you really can't deny that when they go into Snape's memories, when you really get to see Alan Rickman do his best acting, when he really gets a chance to cook, you can see why he's probably the best part of these movies, and his character progression as Snape is just amazing. And at number 1, it should be no surprise, I'm going to go with The Prisoner of Azkaban. Mainly because you can tell it's directed by the best director of all of these in Alfonso Cuarón. He absolutely kills directing this movie. The performances are tremendous, whether it's Lupin, Snape, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Sirius Black. They're all tremendous in this movie, and you can really tell that this is a lot of the top-tier acting. In fact, Alfonso Cuarón in an interview talked about that was one of his favorite scenes to shoot in the Shrieking Shack, and you can tell, it's a lot of actors acting at their peak, but this movie isn't just good because of the directing and the acting. It really brings the vibe of the book. You can really feel that sense of dread for the Dementors and the fear that Sirius Black is coming back and that he might try to kill Harry before you know that he's a friend. Also, the reveal of Peter Pettigrew is really great, and the Time Turner stuff is just really top shelf stuff. Overall, I think this movie is really great. It could have done a little bit better at being faithful to the book, but kind of like what we've talked about, these are big books. You're not always going to be able to get everything into the movie, and I think Alfonso Cuarón captures the vibe of the book better than any of the other movies do, and that's why it's going to be here at number 1. Thank you so much for watching my Harry Potter ranking. I'm just sort of getting into making YouTube videos and kind of making these longer form content videos, so kind of bear with me, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.